What up, guys? Welcome back to TheReviewSpace. Today I'm gonna count down the top 10 unavoidable video game franchises of, well, my experience really, but this is how it goes, baby. Top 10. Number 1, Star Wars. Oh, hands down the champion. Star frickin' Wars. This is unavoidable. There's no way you can have a system and not have a Star Wars game. Pretty much every single console I own, whether it's handheld or a home system, there's at least 1 or 2 or 3 Star Wars games for it. Because that's the thing with Star Wars and Lucas. He has put out all the games for all the systems. Like, he put out so many titles. Ever since like the 80s, Star Wars video games have been around. At least from my knowledge. I don't even know like what the earliest Star Wars game was. I know there was like that early arcade one. But as far as home systems and you know, handheld gaming, they've been around forever. And I mean, you name it, you know, Game Boy, alright, Super Nintendo, N64, you know, GameCube, original Xbox, PS3, PS2, PSPs, Game Boy Advance, you know, it goes on. Like every single system I had. I think the only one is the 360. I'm waiting for like one token Star Wars game for the 360. I don't think I have one quite yet. The closest one would be like Lego Batman, because I know they made Lego Star Wars, but that was yeah, I mean, I'm just, you can't avoid it. You really can't. They're everywhere. Every system has a Star Wars game. They put out a Star Wars video game like every 6 months or so. Every year there's a Star Wars game. Alright? All the way from like, you know, the Knights of the Old Republic stuff to, you know, platforming, you know, shooting or semi-shooting, you know, the Battlefront, and there's so many different games for Star Wars. It just goes on. And there's no way to avoid it, even if you don't like Star Wars. Thankfully, most of the games are actually pretty good, pretty decent. They're playable. And as far as my personal favorite out of all these games, this one's kind of tough. I have really yet to get into the original Knights of the Republic. Probably Battlefront, the original Battlefront for the Xbox. That's in terms of sheer fun and just like a third-person shooter of like replayability. It's just, I love going back to that game. But also Revenge of the Sith for the PS2 is surprisingly enjoyable. Like, I love the lightsaber like duels in that game. Not a great movie, obviously, but it's probably one of those cases where the video game is just much more enjoyable than the film. As far as the older school ones, like obviously in the 90s, 2D Star Wars games, yeah, I mean, you know, the Super series on the Super Nintendo, even the Game Boy stuff was alright. You know, just really difficult. Alright, number 2, sports games. It doesn't matter to me, because all sports games are pretty much very, like, you know, the team sports stuff, whether it's EA Sports or the 2K series, you know, games like Madden. Or if you, it's regional. If you live in the United States, it's Madden. If you live in Canada, it's NHL. And if you live predominantly like in Europe, it'd be FIFA. So those brands of team sports games, soccer / football, American football, and freaking hockey are everywhere, littered all in like bundles. If you buy bundles online or Craigslist, everybody's got at least a couple of those things. You can't avoid it, even if you don't like sports games. Like, I really don't prefer them. I don't go out of my way to find them. They just find me, and they're everywhere. Alright, number 3. Need for Speed. Ugh. Easily the most common, unavoidable racing franchise in history. Need for Speed. Every system has a Need for Speed game. Even like the Game Boy Advance had Need for Speed. This thing started way back in the 3D era of the early 90s, and it's been lingering ever since. And it's not... The thing with the games is like, yeah, they're decent. Most of them are playable. But some of them just suck. You know, like Most Wanted, you know, you have the original one, and then you have this remake, and then you have Shift, and there's like 10 billion of them. They keep releasing them every year. It's an annual release. It's like, you know, the sports games of racing games is Need for Speed. It just comes out every time. Ugh. Need for Speed Underground 2 is okay for the GameCube. It's alright. Alright, number 4. Grand Theft Auto. Ugh. This one's kind of controversial. Maybe you would have thought this was a bit higher, but it's number 4. GTA is really like everywhere. It's been around since the late 90s, but obviously blew up in the early 2000s. If you're a current gen gamer, and heck, even last gen like PS2s and stuff, it's everywhere because it's one of the highest selling franchises of all time. It was like the biggest selling franchise on the PS2. It sold pretty well on the Xbox. And then on the 360 and the PS3 with GTA 4, it's massive, okay? It sold so many copies. It's going to be hard to avoid the GTA franchise because everybody has them. Everybody's played it. And there's so many knockoffs and rip-offs of it, so it's so widespread, that gameplay, that style, that open worldness. And I think I've talked enough about GTA as far as my personal preferences. Alright, number 5. Mario. That's right, the Mario series. It's impossible to avoid Mario if you... only if you play Nintendo systems. Whether it's handheld, whether it's home systems. I mean, I've had Mario since... Mario World was like the first game I played for like the Super Nintendo. Yeah, it's a great game, you know, it's one of my favorites of all time, but it's like the very first one that I played, and I enjoy, like, wow, this is awesome. So, like, back in the 90s, Mario dominated, and then the N64 era, and then the GameCube era. The GameCube era maybe not as popular, not as many people bought the GameCube, but people still have, like, you know, like Sunshine and Double Dash, you know, these Smash Brothers, you know, it's still really popular. So chances are everybody's played some sort of Mario game, whatever genre it is, like sports, racing, fighting, party game, you know, I mean, whatever it is, platforming, it's everywhere. You really can't avoid Mario. Number 6. Sonic. Okay, here we go. Yep, Sonic, everybody's played Sonic 2. It's just that Sonic is not as popular as Mario, and his games aren't as common, but there's still a lot of Sonic titles out there. Especially because they re-release and had compilations and collections, you know, like Mega Collection Plus and all these different, you know, you'll find his games on the Genesis Collection, you know, and the Ultimate Sonic Genesis Collection or whatever, you know, there's so many different things. And of course they always put out new games too, Sonic Generation, Sonic Unleashed, it goes on. So there's a lot of Sonic to be found, and they're everywhere. Not to mention the early mid-90s where Sonic was really popular and he was like one of the top mascots, where his games are really like the Genesis. They made the Genesis worth getting. So it's still, you know, maybe he's not as popular as he used to be, but Sonic is still very unavoidable if you think about it. Number 7. Halo. The Halo franchise. Yes. If you ever get an Xbox system, original Xbox, even the 360, you really can't avoid the Xbox franchise because it's like the biggest selling franchise in those systems. One of the top sellers of all time, and it's just almost like a principle. Like if you buy an Xbox, you should have Halo. You know, it's like, why else would you not have a Halo game? Everybody has been touched by Halo, whether it's and even like when they, you know, branched out onto toys, like the Mega Bloks. Yeah, they're everywhere. I mean, the little figures, the little action figures. There's so many different Halo-based things. And maybe in the past, maybe 2-3 years, Halo hasn't been as hot as a first-person shooter franchise, simply because of other shooters that became successful that kind of overtook Halo in some ways. But Halo is still popular. It's still hard to avoid Halo if you're an Xbox gamer, because it's known. Everybody knows about Halo. All right, number 8. Call of Duty. Okay, yes, COD is everywhere too. And the reason it's a little bit higher in the list, it's not, or rather it's lower in the list, it's not as high, it's not ranked as high, is because yeah, it's common, it's sold a lot of copies, and everybody's played of Call of Duty or experienced it for whatever system. It's just that people like to hold on to COD. Like, people like to keep the games. So it's more of a matter of, yeah, it's really common, but only to people who bought it. People want to keep it. You know, like Modern Warfare 2 or Modern Warfare 3 or Black Ops 2, all these different COD games. People want to keep them. People always end up buying them, rebuying them over and over again. So it's more of a matter of a lot of people desiring and wanting to keep or own a Call of Duty game, as opposed to, you know, this widespread thing where everybody gets it somehow, like passed from owner to owner. Like, it's more of a... they're in high demand. That's all I can say. They're in high demand to the point that it might not be as easy to attain a Mario game just because somebody discarded it or wanted to give it to you. People really want to hold on to Call of Duty. Alright, number 9. Assassin's Creed. Oh yeah, I mean, I think everybody who has a current gen system has not only heard of it, you probably played an Assassin's Creed game, and if you haven't, it must have been the cliche, living under not just a rock, but a freaking boulder. Alright, I played Assassin's Creed games on the PS3, on the 360, and now, I mean, this thing has been available on the PSP, on the DS, you know, PS Vita. It's available on the handhelds too. So the presence of Assassin's Creed is just going to keep growing. It's just going to keep rising. It's everywhere. It's one of those consoles that Ubisoft, they've pushed it so much that they have, you know, books and action figures and all these different things related to Assassin's Creed. I hear there's a movie coming out. But as far as the games, the main reason why it's so common is because they come out every year. You know, it's become like a Call of Duty style release. You know, it's an annual tradition, really. There's an Assassin's Creed pretty much every year now. And ever since like 2007 when it came out, the franchise, it's not even that old. Probably the youngest franchise that I've mentioned in this entire list, for sure. Yeah, it debuted in 2007. That's only, what, 6 years this year. Really, really young. I mean, it came out this generation, PS3, 360, like, wow. Assassin's Creed is everywhere. Definitely my favorite would be Assassin's Creed 2. That's the most critically acclaimed out of all of them, and it's my personal favorite. I just love it. So much improved from the first one, but overall the series itself is to varying degrees of quality. Like, some games are just not as good as the other ones, but Assassin's Creed it's everywhere, and it's just gonna keep spreading. Yeah, maybe you can make the argument that Creed has sort of reached its peak in terms of the current gen hype and interest and its fan base. It's like, this is, you know, we've seen the golden age of Assassin's Creed. Like, this is it. After this generation, moving on to the next one, perhaps it's not going to be as popular, not as pushed, and it's not going to sell. You know, it's just going to kind of decrease in terms of a fan base. Number 10. Pokemon. That's right. Well, Pokemon. Alright. Now, some of you might know I'm not the biggest... I really don't like Pokemon that much, but I used to like it. I really used to enjoy the earlier games. But the thing is, it's really hard to avoid. That's the matter of fact. I mean, every... like, Nintendo owner has to have at least 1 or 2 Pokemon games, especially a handheld owner. Imagine, like, how many people own a DS? It's like the biggest selling system of all time. Everybody has a DS. And then you go to the Game Boy, one of the biggest selling handheld systems of all time too. Like, the original Game Boy was huge. Now we have the 3DS that has a bunch of upcoming, you know, Pokemon games. So Pokemon is everywhere. Pokemon is one of the biggest selling franchises in Nintendo history. It is a flagship title. It is a handheld legend. Alright, very successful. So it's hard to avoid Pokemon games. The only thing is, the reason why it is a bit lower and not rated as high is because, just like with Call of Duty, people like to keep Pokemon. They're very expensive. If you ever go try to buy used, it's going to be like $20, $30 for a fucking used cartridge. Ridiculous. Not that I consider buying it, it's just like, wow, you're still selling like Pokemon Crystal for $30? Like, really? So they're expensive, they're always in demand, like everybody fucking wants a Pokemon game, like they always sell out, you know what I mean? Eventually you're gonna find a buyer for Pokemon games, like they're around, everybody wants those things, so yeah, that's it. That's my top 10 unavoidable video game franchises. Game series and franchises, brand names that you just cannot avoid. Eventually you'll own one copy at least and play it on whatever system.